Hi, and welcome back. We are back in conversation with well-respected trauma practitioner Michele Smith. Michele has her advanced level trauma and resilience practitioner certification, graduate certification in complex trauma at the master's level, some graduate studies in pastoral care and counseling, and 24 years experience with survivors of traumatic death of a loved one. Michele is the founder and president of Aaron Society, Focus on Trauma, a nonprofit that offers peer support and education in trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. This is Michele's primary way of giving back to the community. She also does some private practice in the city of Victoria and surrounding districts. Welcome back, Michele. It's so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Tyler.
We live in just in an unprecedented time in history. Today, we're going to discuss the effects of the lockdown measures that we see around us on children. Michele, you have explained in previous videos that trauma is an event that can overwhelm the ability to cope and traps fear or terror directly in the nervous system, holding a victim in a fight, flight, or freeze state. So just a quick recap on the experience of trauma, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all. Just a quick definition is that trauma is an event or circumstance or experience that involves actual or perceived threats to one's own safety or the safety of a loved one. It is usually categorized by feelings of helplessness,
Mm,
um, terror. That's a big one. Or fear, but extreme fear actually, with the individual unable to come to terms with the events. And so that's basically it in a nutshell.
okay, thank you. So at this particular time, what comes to mind in terms of what sort and type of potential traumatic effects have the children been exposed to during these periods of lockdown?
Well, I have to tell you, Tyler, that's not a quick and easy question because they've been
Yeah,
exposed to a ton of stuff, as you know. I mean, I don't have
yeah.
to tell you this, but I'll rattle some things off in terms of
Okay.
what they've, because people tend to think that this is one traumatic thing. It isn't. This is running traumatic material that these kids are thriving on. So
Mm,
we have things like missed school, daycare, and friends, milestone celebrations, which is big, like graduations, birthday,
yeah.
have either been missed or changed. So those are big things in
That
people's
yeah,
lives.
that one really affected my own children.
I'll bet.
I
I
have a grade
remember that
12
actually.
who cannot do anything with graduation, and he has no way to connect with friends and peers and no way to have a solid remembrance of this particular year.
Huge
It's very
milestone.
traumatic.
It is very traumatic because it's what they work for all those
Yeah,
years. That is a
yeah.
huge milestone, a huge celebration, a huge accomplishment in their lives, and that's just kind of been written off that they can't celebrate. So that's a big one. It's definitely a big one. There's a lots of routine or disturbing of the day-to-day routine for them, so that can be very traumatic for children. Watching parents as well, especially parents who may be stressed, um, or they may be say first responders or
Mm,
essential services, or they may have financial loss. So
mhm,
they're watching the stress level. They may be worried about safety of adults, who have to go
okay.
to work. Even worried about adults who are going to the store to purchase groceries, for that matter,
Mhm,
because they're seeing what they're seeing downtown. They have worry about uh, what's on the news and social media and what they're overhearing adults and parents talking about. Kids are getting a pretty steady diet of that. I mean, that's on everybody's conversation plate right now. So they have lack of play and socialization. With their peers, they're seeing grocery stores with missing items. that they're accustomed to, that we don't even think about that. Why
Yeah.
isn't there any? A lack of safe places to go outside, including parks that have
Hmm.
been just a daily mainstay. I mean, how can children? What do you mean we can't go to the park? This is not. So that becomes not a safe place anymore. So we have chronic worry. In fact, I had listened to one lady who had said her 8-year-old daughter had, from the beginning, had been following her around, then it started, and that now she was waking up and finding her sleeping at the base of her bed. So
Wow.
yeah, there's a lot of effects on kids that we're not recognizing. So we have chronic worry about friends and family members getting sick. So they're in a chronic state of worry about that. The home environment may be disrupted, and they may be witnessing substance abuse increase. They irritability on the parts of parents. They may not be able to see their main support system in life, like maybe that's grandma, or maybe that's a daycare provider. They may not be able to access that support. They may be undergoing or witnessing abuse and neglect, or witnessing domestic violence, an increase in domestic
Yeah,
violence.
I can
That's
see
the
that.
big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have this consistent 24/7 reminders of threat to their safety, with the masks, the social distancing,
Hmm.
social isolation, the chronic stress, arrows in stores. I mean, they have 24/7 reminders of threat, prolonged uncertainty, feelings of powerlessness and helplessness, and fear. Truthfully, honestly, Tyler, I think I could go on, but you kind of get the picture with that one. It's
Yeah.
kind of an endless thing for kids, 24/7.
So if I hear you correctly, it is a huge lack of safety or security that is the prevailing theme right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, if that's the case, how does this affect children when they are exposed to traumatic life events?
Well, let me see if I can just kind of do this. How I show clients and kids. If you see, this part of your arm is the brainstem,
Okay.
and then we have the midbrain and the emotional brain with the amygdala inside there, and then we have the neocortex. It just kind of cradles all of that in.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
normal day, we go along, and these are kind of bouncing off each other and working just fine. We may walk into a cold classroom. Our sensory says this is cold, which is this part. It's chilly in here. This part says good, go get a sweater. That's the reasoning
Okay.
part, go on.
Yeah.
So, they're kind of working together. Then you may come back and you may look and looking for a place to sit. And this part says, don't sit beside that guy. He clicked his pen all day yesterday, and you know what that feels like. And this part says, yeah, go sit on the
Okay.
other side of the room.
I
So
know those people.
yeah. So, this is kind of, the rational and the emotional, the sensory all balancing, it's working pretty good.
Okay.
But then we have, a crisis or a trauma. Information comes in, hits the midbrain, and guess what happens? This is the amygdala, which is our fear center, or the part that kind of screams danger, danger. It's like a fire alarm, and it
Okay.
starts to fire. Danger, 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 danger.
Yeah.
And guess what happens? So if that trauma doesn't get resolved, and with ongoing stress like that, it's not resolved. So they can't make sense of it, and this starts to flip its lid. And so fear is now in control. It's flooding
Mm.
chemicals. It's setting off chemicals, lots that we don't even know the name of, but adrenaline and cortisol is flooding in there, readying for fight or flight. And guess what's the first thing that happens? This.
Oh, it splits.
Yeah, can't access that because this is in full-blown fear. Now, here's what
Okay.
you keep it up, and that does not get resolved. And guess what happens to the neocortex, the reasoning part of the brain? Here it goes, right here. It's gone. You're done.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're not accessing that at all now. So
And so you're trapped in that lower brain function area.
emotional. Yeah. Yeah. You're complete. So we have children, who've been with this chronic stress. It's chronically being fed with fear, and there's no let up really for them. They're seeing reminders of threat everywhere. You've got traumatic reaction. You do with adults as well. I'm seeing a lot of adults with traumatic reaction, and the cognitive part of the brain that's reasoning things out is just taking a walk, and you can't. There we are, and the body is flooding with chemicals, and we are now in raw survival mode.
Wow.
And so it's a pretty. It causes hypervigilance, and of course, with children with hypervigilance, their whole bodies are on alert. Because they're in raw survival and they're in fight or flight, and hypervigilant is the constant scanning for threat, constantly looking and being aware of threat. Now, the interesting thing about children in hypervigilance is I've actually seen children walk through my home, my living room, into the area where I do some work, and they look like they're, looking straight ahead. A week later, they stop dead in the living room, turn their head like this, walk over and turn an ornament back the way it was a week ago.
Wow.
When they are hypervigilant, they don't miss a darn thing. They seem to absorb things in their peripheral because they are so on high alert, and their systems are on so high alert that they are literally absorbing their environment, scanning for danger. And so that's a lot of the state that we're seeing kids in, and it's really going unrecognized. So if that
Absolutely
helps.
Yeah, that does help. Thank you. So if this is what's happening for the children in terms of hypervigilance, then what sort of behaviors are we likely to see from a child that is hypervigilant and or traumatized?
That's a really good question, because Tyler, because the effects on trauma and learning are well documented and accessible. And
Okay.
when you saw me do this is the first thing that's going to happen. You can imagine why they are going to have some learning issues, or they can have some learning issues. So you may find children with math difficulties, because it's this part of the brain is the problem solving. That's all working through issues and problems. So high math issues can be really prominent. Then you may have problem solving difficulties. We may have you may have all kinds of actually learning struggles with children because of the cognitive alterations due to trauma exposure. So if a child how do I put this? If a child remains in an aroused state like that for any length of time, aroused state of fear, I guess is what I'm saying, and finds it difficult to process verbal information, so it becomes a struggle to start to follow directions for them. So directions you find with a traumatized child, oftentimes I'll even have to say, you don't say to a traumatized child, for example, who may be hypervigilant, I want you to go down to the cupboard downstairs, open up the door, and on the top shelf. That's not what you do. You have to give them one piece at a time, because they have a lot of trouble.
That's all they can handle is that
Exactly.
one piece of information.
Right. And so if it becomes hard for them, difficult to process the verbal information, or it becomes a struggle, it then becomes a struggle for them to follow directions or to recall what we heard,
For
what did I
sure.
hear, and they may have to come back and say, what did you say? Because they haven't been able to absorb it all, or they heard it, but they aren't able to make sense of what they heard. They aren't able to organize all of that. So focus and retention also is a big issue, and recall that may become very difficult for them, and the cognitive effects may go unrecognized, for a very long time. But you may also, aside from the cognitive effects, you may also see low self-esteem. That's a really common one with kids who have been traumatized.
I can imagine.
Victim thinking is high, and they don't know that they're engaging in almost perpetual victim thinking. But that one is quite an identifiable one. But that goes along with hopelessness, powerlessness, a loss of sense of self, and the ability to regulate their responses to stress and emotional regulation. So that may be really negatively altered. They could have a shattered sense of safety. That's common. Acting out and anger can become assaultive, even if it isn't violent. So we may see high risk, at-risk behavior from kids right now. Exaggerated startle response and feelings of detachment. I think you'd really be able to relate to, Tyler, because that one is a pretty predominant one. That dissociative thing and estrangement from others. And the inability to experience positive emotions like joy. It's a lot of negative emotions and a ton, and so many others that you might see in children. So in short, I guess not feeling safe on the sensory level of things causes alterations in cognitive functioning and processing, and that's the bottom line.
Wow, this sounds like it's already that we have a crisis in our educational system, because so many of the symptoms and behaviors that you described, our kids are already demonstrating, and those are increasing. That's amazing and scary, actually.
And that's a really good point.
Yeah. Are there any visible changes in the way that the children perceive others and around them if this hypervigilance is what's happening?
Yeah, most definitely. Actually, the fear itself is real. That's real enough, but it may not be based upon the reality of a current situation. So the fear may be old.
It's still the filter that becomes the filter that they see everything through.
That's correct. Yeah, precisely. It's stuck, and it's like like someone who has suffering from trauma, unresolved trauma, and something that happened 10 years ago is still circling the brain as if it happened now. So once it's stuck, it may not relate in reality to the circumstance, but that fear is extremely real, and there's no doubting that whatsoever.
It's reality for them.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So that's a danger. The danger itself may be over, but the sense that it's not still remains, and can lead children to behaviors like being afraid to leave home. If the original threat made them feel blindsided, for example, they may be suspicious that of anyone who doesn't answer their questions, thinking they're hiding something from me, and so on, because I was blinded by this thing, over there. And so often their behaviors or cognitive alterations, I guess we could call them, are misread and unfortunately misdiagnosed. And so the traumatic experience is encoded in what we call the implicit memory, and that just refers to an event is remembered in the body and central nervous system. So it's the reaction to it that is actually stored in the body is carrying that reaction in that memory. And
so the filter is not just mental, it's partly physical as well.
It's almost all physical. It's one of the reasons why you can't cognitively talk people out of their traumatic response. That that's gone for a walk. This is trapped into that central nervous system, and it's actually that's why how they've said, Tyler, the body keeps the score.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. So the body, the sensory experience of all of this and how you felt, that's what's trapped. And so you can't talk to people cognitively until you deal with the fear that's trapped there.
I think we'll come back to that in a minute, but based on what you've said, I have questions coming through my mind. I think I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because there may be others that are wondering about this specifically. If the threat is over,
right?
If I've heard you correctly, it isn't possible to just sit down with somebody and use logic and say, hey, the trauma is over, it's okay, work through it. You can't do that, can you?
No, actually, because you're trying to reason with someone whose reasoning may have gone offline.
Because you said that part of the brain is
Right.
gone.
And just because the thread is missing doesn't mean for that person that's gone, because it is a sensory experience. And so someone, a child or adult
Okay.
actually, is not going to feel safe just because people tell them they should feel safe, and to not be driven by fear. They no longer sense the world as a safe place,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
they need to feel safe, and not to hear they are safe. They are not likely to process it because it isn't happening in that part of the brain. So you can, they're not likely to
Okay.
process you telling them they feel safe. They need to feel that safety.
So with everything that's going on with COVID and the lockdown measures that seem to always be perpetuating,
Hmm.
it would be my understanding then that those environmental experiences are simply driving home the fear again and again and again, because it doesn't seem to ever end, and there's no end in sight.
No, and that's exactly kind of what's happening. So the children, they learn to emotionally regulate by playing with other children, and
Okay. Yeah.
they learn about a team and community from their sports, and they learn, you say, groups that they belong to. You know,
Hmm.
they learn about relationship, from those around them.
It's
uh,
vitally important.
it's critical, and so
Yeah.
on. So all of their relationships and so on in their teens, and their, even churches and all of that kind of thing. This is where children learn how to emotionally regulate another child, for example, or someone can actually help co-regulate each other.
Hmm.
Where one child may decide that something is terrible and they're going to really emotionally kind of have a reaction, another child's reaction and support can actually help them to co-regulate their emotions.
Okay.
So they learn how to regulate
Yeah,
emotions through
that makes sense.
play. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it as adults as well, but really with children, it's very important. So these are the very things that we've taken away from them. And
Hmm.
worse, everyone and everything in their world has been turned into a potential threat. And the reminders of that are driven home every single day. Social distancing, don't get close, masks, and those they see wearing them. Don't go to public parks, don't play hockey,
Yeah.
don't go to youth group, etc., etc., etc. We have many of those restrictions are lifting now, but it doesn't mean that the children now feel safe and school is back in, but with the constant reminder of threat and restrictions. So if the children are living in homes with parents, and also fearful, the children will take their cues from them and believe that they are unsafe and powerless. So everyone knows that children, or anyone actually for that matter, does better when their environment, schedule, and life is as least disrupted and as normal as it can possibly get. Everyone knows that. So children who are suffering a traumatic reaction will ultimately seek safety, mostly from caregivers. And so their behavior is quite frequently misinterpreted as problematic, when in fact they may be trying to be seeking safety or security in some way. And whether or
Okay.
not they have been previously traumatized will also affect reactions and behaviors. Each child actually is an individual, and so will their reactions be. Being curious and asking a lot of questions of the kids is really paramount for adults to do, and showing that interest in making eye contact, because they will all react differently depending on what their prior experience with it has been.
Um, so essentially, you're saying that each child is a unique individual and interprets things uniquely and needs to be treated uniquely.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So if the children are taking their cues primarily right now from the caretakers, then a question that comes to my mind is, if parents, teachers, and others that are caretakers and so on in the lives of the children, they may be traumatized themselves
Hmm. Hmm.
and they may be fear driven.
Yeah.
But I would hope that they know that they are, and that they're not, if they're in that condition, that they're not in a really good place to help the children, you would think.
You would think, and that's a really good point, Tyler, actually. Not necessarily would they know. See, the fear is a reaction that is not made sense of. So the brain will often just justify the fear response in an attempt to make sense of it and secure some kind of safety.
Mhm.
So you could put undeniable proof in front of them that this is not what they are perceiving, and they would not hear you.
Oh,
Information, yeah, no other area. Information, even solid information, will be rejected. The sensory experience must be changed first, the fear dealt with, before processing cognitive information is likely to occur. Education is also important. The more one can learn about the experience, the better they are able to identify it when traumatic reactions start to happen.
okay. Again, if I just want to clarify, so if I've heard you correctly, the sensory experience of the trauma filter trumps logic.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. Yep.
Okay. Ugh. It sounds, I mean, if this is the case, it sounds like we're really looking at some long-term effects of this, especially on the children. This whole situation in the lockdowns and the uncertainty and the lack of safety. I mean, it seems like a recipe for trauma.
I've heard many health professionals, mental health professionals recently refer to it as a trauma tsunami.
Ouch. Oh,
Yeah. And I think that's probably a very accurate description, of what is going on here. So we will be seeing the effects of this for years. It's not going to go away. Like we have a public that somehow believes, don't worry, this will be over soon. No, it isn't going to be over soon.
mm,
Once you traumatize children like that, and once you traumatize even adults like that, that fear is not leaving just because you tell them COVID did. It's not. This is trapped in the nervous system, and you're going to be triggering through life. And if it goes untreated, we are looking at some devastating effects of this, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and probably further, because trauma is, as you know, it's generational. It can be
yeah,
generational. So health professionals have referred to it as child abuse, as blatant child abuse. That's what they,
wow.
some of them are saying. They say we are conditioning a whole generation of children for a fear response and trauma. And in some of their opinion, it's nothing short of abuse.
Wow, those are really strong labels and
Mm,
strong words.
mm. Yep,
But but I can see that because what are the effects of child abuse? It's trauma reactions.
exactly,
So
exactly.
this is systemic child abuse.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting that we brought up the word safety earlier because um, we've heard that word a lot recently coming from health officials and government when it comes to lockdown measures. It's for your own safety
Mm.
that and the safety of others that seems to be the justification and the general narrative that's being pushed. But in truth, is that what's happening? Is this truly a safety issue?
This is where I think I probably have a lot to say because in my view, that seems well, the whole is for your own safety. In my view, that seems a very propagated illusion. When
Hmm.
we are hearing stats every day of the numbers of people who may have tested positive for a virus instead of death stats, that's really, that's driving fear, not safety. Really, the
Hmm.
only thing it has any relevance is death stats, and not stuff. We don't hear updates about cancer. We're not hearing
No,
updates about heart disease, polio, hunger, suicides, etc. on a daily basis. How about roughly
no.
60 million people die globally every single year? We're not hearing regular updates about that. So
Wow.
keep your distance from people puts everyone in the category of a threat. And so shut down schools and isolate is not only fear driven, it tears at the very fabric of community and life itself for children. Shut your business down, complete economic disaster. There's lots of with the potential of causing suicide, depression, poverty, mental health issues.
Hmm.
wear a mask, again, the hiding of identity and pronounced visual reminder of the threat. On and on we go. So these measures are causing suicides to climb, drug overdose deaths, PTSD, mental health issues, poverty. 10,000 extra deaths a month from hunger in children globally, Tyler, rise.
Yeah.
It's
It
just,
doesn't seem to compare.
it doesn't compare. So in a rise in domestic violence, and hustles are now saying as well, they're saying more and more of the young coming in with self-harm and cutting. So when these measures are killing and or destroying more people than saving, when they're driven by fear, how can we say it is for your safety and the safety of others? How can we say that? But many will believe it. They'll follow the mandates blindly, and despite evidence to the contrary, because their fear and their need for safety is so great. So are these measures going to stop a virus? It's unlikely. I mean, when was the last time you heard these measures stop the flu bug? Who is most at risk? Protect those that are at risk the best we can. Everyone else, get on with your lives. The shutting down of businesses and churches, etc., has in some cases shut down the facilities that were being used by those who were offering trauma help. And so that's effectively cutting off people's avenue to get the help they need. And are we, as one man so adeptly put it, in our zeal to save the life of one, effectively ending all relevant life for everybody else? Is that what we're doing? So these are questions that really do need to be openly asked, and we have to look at every side of this coin and how it is affecting people before we can actually claim that what we're doing is right, and that we are making really well-informed decisions in terms of what we're doing. So, and as well as I do, that many people don't know a lot about trauma. And so the fact that we are continually traumatizing children and we're going to have serious repercussions is not good. So BC has not had as many mandates as many of the other countries or provinces and stuff. That we can be grateful. But we have over 5 million people in this province and just over 200 deaths. So these are hardly the stats that should justify the level of damage done, and especially to children. So I have seen.
So wait, I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
In British Columbia, we have about 5 million people, give or take.
Over.
And we've only had about just over 200 deaths.
Right.
Due directly to complications arising from or due directly to COVID itself.
Right. That's what's on the death certificate. So whether
that's what's on the death certificate.
Right.
So that is extremely low, given any other relevant comparable statistic, yes, even comparable to a flu or a cold.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very low stats. And when you think globally, even when you think 60 million people die globally a year of all kinds of diseases, this again, even globally, and some of the stats are very much in question. So it might not even be that, because for a while there they didn't have proper testing at all, and so they were putting COVID on anything that might look like it, so those stats are even in question as to whether. And then when they did have testing, they did find that 50% of that was false positives, and on we go. So those are even in question as to whether or not that's really been how many have actually died of COVID.
So how do we justify the damage being done with these statistics? How do we justify that to the damage being done to our children?
I don't know, Tyler. That's a really interesting question, because I have to tell you that despite the fact that this is becoming more and more prominent in mental health, practitioners are coming out, and even there was one psychologist not that long ago who was just, he's so verbal about it. He said this is, in his mind, this was blatant child abuse, and he talked about some of the same circumstances I'm seeing as well. he looked distraught. I feel distraught, as you know, all the time because of it. And yet they know this. This is being talked about. They know 900. We have lost 900 people, over 900 people this year in drug overdoses alone, only in the provinces of BC.
Wow.
It's just huge. And so, but what happens? They keep doing the same thing over and over again. So they know nobody's really talking about it, but they know, they're aware of what they've done and what they're causing. And so what do? Well, yeah, but there might be a second wave, so we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to give you more of the same. Well, I have to question,
Yeah.
why that's being done when you're perfectly well aware of the damage that's being done.
Yeah.
So there is, I've seen, just as an example, a few short months ago, I did some painting with kids, and they depicted these gorgeous landscapes and water, typical British Columbia painting,
Hmm.
trees and blue water, some of them so absolutely startlingly good for little kids. It was just really good. So then just a couple of weeks ago, I said, let's paint and see what's going on. They depicted billows of black smoke going
Mm.
into the sky, destruction of the earth, machinery, chaos everywhere,
Wow.
deforestation, destruction. Like it was, I said to them, wow, guys, I said a few weeks ago, we had this, a couple of months ago, we had this, and now this. And one little kid said, yeah, well, that's my worldview.
Oh,
I said,
poor little one.
I
Oh,
know. So this is, don't think it's not affecting them, because I can tell you that's wrong. Because what I saw, it's just, I seen children, well, we can discuss that in our school one, Tyler, but I asked what their greatest fear was, and they're used to me, so I'll say greatest fear. Anybody, haven't checked for a while, greatest fear, and then when I say scale of 1 to 10, they'll let me know how high that fear is and how important it is. So guess what greatest fear was?
mm,
This is never going to end.
mm,
They're the greatest fear. So this constant uncertainty,
wow.
yeah, constant uncertainty, and this is constantly driving fear and trauma, and our bodies are only meant to experience stress for a short time. When
Mm,
high stress is prolonged and exaggerated, it causes our nervous systems to be dysregulated due to the increase of stress hormones and circulating through the body like that. So many of the children have been exposed to ongoing chronic stress and trauma.
mhm. And other words for that are adrenal burnout,
Yeah.
and
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and we have some idea of what that does on a person's body,
Hmm.
mind, and spirit, and it is not good.
Yeah.
So, um, given all of this, what can we possibly do? What would be a next step for us?
For me, in particular, Tyler, it is the hopes for me, and of course the board with the Urine Society and so on. It is the hopes of convincing those that we need to, that appropriate interventions need to be put in schools,
Mm,
with children, and also in communities. Waiting could be catastrophic. So this is only part one of the discussion on children. So
mm,
we, well, I'll let you tell about that, because
yeah.
but yeah, so we, that's my, is trying to convince the parents, children, parents, for heaven's sakes, get on your schools. I have lots of programs that I can do with kids, but I got to tell you, appropriate interventions, I think, are very necessary, and
Okay.
waiting should not happen. We should, in my opinion, we need to be in there.
Well, the quicker that measures can be taken to
Yeah,
help,
yeah.
the more we can see change, and the trauma not become as engrammatic as it possibly could be. Um, Michelle, I thank you so much for your perspective, and it's always a great pleasure in talking with you. Um, I know that you walk the walk that you talk, and you're more than willing to roll up your sleeves and offer whatever you can. I know you get down and you're with the people. So I'm looking forward to talking with you again on part 2, which will be what can we do in our schools and how can we help.
Yeah, and what's going on in schools too.
Yeah.
Back to school
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, you can get in touch with Michele at Aaron Society website or her personal website, which is Aaron Society Focus on Trauma, all one word, .com, or Trauma Practitioner, all one word, .com. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, Ty. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you.